Welcome to the Blood Moon Archives. We are happy you could join us for some terrifying first-person encounters with things that go bump in the night. Please drop a like and subscribe. It helps our channel to grow and helps us to add more scary stories. If you would like to send us your story, please use the link in the description.
I never thought a weekend hike would end like this. I mean, whoever does? You go out with your friends, enjoy the fresh air, snap some pictures, and maybe get a little lost, but nothing too serious. But what happened to me and my best friends, Sophie and Emma, is something I'll never forget. None of us will ever forget it. And to be honest, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Enough time has passed that I can finally talk about it without feeling fear or embarrassment. I mean, did we even see what we think we saw? It was a Saturday morning when we arrived at the parking lot of Yoho Provincial Park, which is part of the Canadian Rocky Mountains on the British Columbia side, not Alberta. There is a very small, quaint town there with only about 169 year-round residents. We wanted to stay in the little village, as there are a few Airbnbs there, but there was no vacancy the weekend that we went. We ended up staying in the town of Golden, which is about a 30-minute drive from the park. We booked a cheap local hotel, as we didn't care about any bells and whistles. After all, it wasn't a spa weekend. It was a weekend of hiking and getting in touch with nature. Our goal was simple: hike, read, have snacks, and come back tired. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, that crisp fall chill in the air. We got our backpacks on, hid anything under the back seats in the car that someone may do a smash and grab for, like our purses and electronics. We locked the car and set out onto the trail. As it was only a day trip, we packed pretty light with just snacks, water, and a book each. For us, hiking wasn't about conquering the unconquerable terrain or burning out as many miles as we can in a day. It was more about a slow, quiet pace. Be at one with nature around us without nature getting scared off by our noise pollution. We didn't care if we got very far. In fact, there was no destination. It was all about the journey. Emma was in charge of the map. Sophie had the compass, so we didn't get turned around and lost, as this can be a common experience for hikers going into the Canadian wilderness. Usually a few times a year, hikers and skiers get lost on the outbacks of the mountains, and search and rescue have to go find them. I was the group forager. I had developed a serious interest with finding things in nature, and I was on the lookout for mushrooms or any interesting foliage. We really enjoy foraging when we go hiking, and I even have apps for identifying mushrooms. Even though we have found plenty of mushrooms on our hikes, we have never been courageous enough to cook them up for dinner. Too many edible mushrooms look like their poisonous counterparts, and we were too inexperienced to risk it. From the moment we left the parking lot and entered the park's paths, we found ourselves in complete awe. It's one of those places where people go to disconnect, away from all the city noise. The kind of place you go to forget about your problems for a while. Breathe in the fresh air, hear the birds, which there were plenty of, and just soak in all that nature has to offer. I remember Emma was in the front, practically skipping ahead. She's always been the energetic one of our trio, you know? Sophie was more in the middle, checking her phone compass to make sure we were going in a consistent direction. "Damn it," Sophie said as she swiped at her phone screen. "What's wrong?" I asked her. The app started an update. I barely have any bars. "It's okay, we will go slow and leave markers behind." I always carried a stick of white chalk to old school mark the trees, in case our technology craps the bed like it did that day. I was one of those people that gets easily embarrassed when I'm lost or hurt, so I always have a backup plan when I do anything involving technology. Yes, I even have paper maps for road trips. As we walked, I marked the trees on the right-hand side with a big chalk swipe, the first with a happy face to signify the beginning and the end. The reason for this was when we came back in this direction, we knew the chalk would be on our left-hand side, and we would be going in the correct direction to get back to the car. Sophie was in the lead with Emma in the middle, and I brought up the tail, snapping a few pictures of the scenery as we moved along. The forest was thick with trees and the bustle of nature moving about their day. The greenery was magical as we arrived at a sitting area with a small waterfall after about an hour into our hike. The water poured down from the side of the mountain. The slate rocks glistened with the chill of the spring water as it churned at the bottom where it fell. I had taken a few pictures of some odd-looking mushrooms that clung to a nearby tree. The churning of the water made a light rumble as it folded itself in and out at the bottom of the waterfall. It was a light rumble, but not enough to drown out the noise of the forest as we sat to have our sandwiches. Emma had just went through a bad breakup with her boyfriend of 2 years the week before our hiking trip. So it was honestly one of those carefree moments where everything felt right. We sat talking about how she was feeling and glad to hear that she wasn't sad anymore about the breakup. Mostly just disappointed at another failed relationship and a future they will never have. That's when I first felt it. I can't really explain it, but it was like a sudden drop in temperature, followed by complete silence in the forest. The hairs on the back of my neck pricked up. I looked around, thinking maybe a breeze had kicked up, but the air was still, too still. You know that feeling when someone's staring at you, even though you can't see them? That's exactly what it felt like. Is it just me, or does something feel off? I asked, glancing over at Sophie and Emma. Sophie raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I don't know, like someone's watching us, I said, trying to brush it off. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Emma, of course, rolled her eyes. Probably just a deer or something. But I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. My eyes kept darting through the trees, trying to catch a glimpse of anything that moved. It was like I could almost feel something out there, hidden just behind the shadows. Do you hear that? I asked Emma and Sophie. No, I don't hear anything, Sophie replied, as she glanced around for whatever I was talking about. Exactly, I said. There's nothing, no sounds, no birds, no nothing. Sophie appeared to sit up a little straighter, visibly uncomfortable. You're right. There are no sounds at all. We stayed there for a while longer, trying to shake off the eerie feeling, get back to our nonsense fluffy chatter. But I could tell the vibe had changed. My skin felt like it was on edge. I noticed Sophie seemed distracted, like she was scanning the woods too. Emma hadn't said much, but I could see her glancing around. Her usual carefree attitude now replaced with unease. We were all obviously uncomfortable with our surroundings at this point. Maybe there's a bear close by, Sophie said. Anybody have bear spray? We all shook our heads. I was always under the impression that wildlife like bears, wolves, and coyotes were easily scared off by groups of people as opposed to single hikers. After a couple of hours, we finally decided to head back to the car. Our unease had not settled, and the forest had been silenced for too long with no noise around us except for the occasional rustling of a leaf. We packed up our snacks and books and started to head back to the car. We watched along the left-hand side of the trees to keep with the correct direction back to the parking lot. There were no bars out here, and Sophie hadn't gotten the Compass app update completed before we left the last zone where there was internet access with our cell phone data. The birds had still not resumed their chirping, and there was this eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. It was so heavy that we could actually feel the pressure on our shoulders slowing down our steps. Every crunch of leaves beneath our boots felt unnaturally loud, and I kept glancing around, expecting something to jump out at me. The urge to sneak back to the car was strong, and it slowed our steps. Then it happened. We were about 10 minutes down the trail when Emma, who was up ahead again, suddenly froze. Her body stiffened, and I could hear her breath catch in her throat. Guys, do you hear that? She whispered. Sophie and I froze, instinctively looking at each other. We both shook our heads, confused. Hear what? I asked. Emma's face had gone pale. It's like growling, like an animal, but not anything I've ever heard before. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt it then too. It prickled at the back of my neck. That dread creeping in. I turned to Sophie, and her face was as pale as Emma's. Maybe it's just a bear, Sophie said, trying to sound calm. But I could hear the tension in her voice. Bears don't growl like that, Emma said, her voice shaking. It's something else. We stood there for what felt like forever, listening. The growl came again. Low, guttural, and it seemed to come from all around us, echoing in the trees. My stomach dropped. That was no bear. And definitely not a deer. This was something bigger. "We need to go," I said, already moving at double the pace to walk back the way we came. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my legs felt like they were moving on their own. Sophie and Emma followed quickly, but the growling didn't stop. In fact, it seemed to be getting closer. My eyes kept scanning the woods, but I couldn't see anything. The trees were too dense, and the light was starting to fade. We were moving fast now, practically running. I didn't care about anything anymore, just getting out of there, just getting away from whatever was stalking us. But then we heard something else, something worse. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps that sounded like they were matching our pace, but with a much longer stride. I couldn't breathe. I glanced behind us, but there was nothing there. Not at first. But then, oh God, just as we rounded a corner in the trail, I saw it. It was a massive shape, probably about 6 feet tall. I can't even begin to explain how big it was because I have never seen an animal that big. As the shadows took over the forest, it was hard to make out the detail. It appeared its body was covered in dark, matted fur, and its eyes, those eyes, were bright with an unnatural amber. Its teeth were long, sharp, and it was snarling at us, showing off those deadly fangs. "Is that a wolf?" I asked, to no one in particular. "I don't think there's wolves out here," Emma replied. It appeared to be some kind of a dog, a massive dog. No, a wolf of some kind, but a really big one that appeared to stand up somewhat on its haunches. But I knew it wasn't a dog or a wolf. Too big and too thick. It was some kind of a dog man. I can't believe I'm actually saying that, but that's what it was. It was like something out of a nightmare, and I didn't know what to do. My body froze. But Emma, who'd always been the brave one, screamed. It was a raw, gut-wrenching scream that shook me to the core. That thing, whatever it was hidden among the thickness of the tree branches. We could hear the snap of the twigs all around us as the sound echoed and grew. "Run," Sophie screamed, her voice barely audible over the growls and the sound of our pounding feet. We ran. We didn't look back. The trees blurred around us, and I could hear that thing's footsteps right behind us, closing in. It took everything we had to watch for the chalk lines, and not just run in a panicked fury, which surely would have gotten us permanently lost and potentially eaten. Somehow, by sheer adrenaline, we saw the happy face. We kept running, hearts racing, breath ragged. We didn't stop until we stumbled out of the woods and into the clearing where our car was in the distance. There were no cars there now. It was empty, and the sunshine of the day was beginning to be replaced by the dusty haze of evening. It felt like we'd been running forever. Our legs were like jello. Out of breath, shaking, and covered in dirt, we collapsed at the car door. The sounds of the forest slowly returned. Whatever was out there, whatever was chasing us, was gone. The silence in that moment was deafening. We're okay, right?" Emma whispered, voice trembling. We all piled into the car and said nothing as we drove away. I kept watch out the back window to make sure nothing was following us. I thought I could see a cloudy shape standing in the shadows of the tree line. Someone or something watching us as our car left the parking lot. Sophie spoke in a low tone, her eyes wide. "We'll never talk about this again." And we didn't. Not to anyone, not even to each other. Because no one would ever believe us. I don't think we even believed us. I still don't know what happened that day. I still don't know what that thing was. Maybe it was just a really big man, which didn't bring me any comfort. But I do know one thing. I will never, ever hike those trails again. In fact, it's been 6 years.
Please drop a like and subscribe. It helps our channel to grow and helps us to add more scary stories. If you would like to send us your story, please use the link in the description.